Let's talk a little bit about using composition, framing, and lead lines within your frame to really elevate your photos and take them to a whole new level. So you can take a photo that looks okay and make it excellent by simply taking the time to really position your subject in the right place so it brings all the attention to them and where you want your viewers' eyes to go to, as opposed to just closing your eyes and taking a photo and hoping for the best. I cannot repeat how important it is to frame your subjects properly and how a lead line can be extremely distracting and take away from your picture. Before you even click that shutter button, I think that people don't take enough time to really look beyond their subject and see what's going on when you're ready to snap the photo. I think a lot of people with digital photos have gotten accustomed to just taking a lot of pictures and rushing through the process, whereas before with film, you really had to take your time. I don't come from a film era. I have shot film before. I do it for fun still, but it's not like me preaching as like, oh, back in my day when we shot film. That's not what I'm doing here, because that was not me. When I started, it was already digital photography. So I think that if we were to approach it as a film where when you're shooting film, you have a certain amount of frames per roll and you have to make them count. So you would stand there, you would look at your photo or your subject and see, okay, how can I position them within this frame to bring the most impact to this moment, to bring the most attention to the subject. So you would really take your time to analyze and make sure you maximize that outcome from the moment that you press the shutter. With digital photos, it's so easy to just take. And then when you sit down on the computer, like, oh, I wish I would have moved a little bit this way. I would have changed the angle that way. I think it's really important to kind of have that film approach to digital photography, and it'll elevate your work just incredibly. So let's dive into a few of the examples that I have here that I believe will kind of show you very clearly what I mean when I say framing and composition and placing your subject within the frame in a place that is bringing more attention to the subject, and using those lead lines to not take away but to bring attention to the subject. So let's go ahead and dive into that. This example is a perfect example of small tweaks. Before we dive into the tweaks that got to this photo, let's define what I mean by lead lines. Lead lines are generally anything that's prominent within your frame. So in this case, the line of the greenery here, this bush, that would be considered a lead line. You could even consider the palm trees a lead line. The ground and bush line here would be a lead line. The way that her dress is kind of bending could be a lead line as well. So lead lines are prominent lines within your frame that really can be used to point attention to a certain place. And sometimes, if not placed correctly, they can take attention away from your subject and just really give you an uneasy feeling. Framing your photo a certain way, we'll talk about, let's say, the rule of thirds, which if you look it up, you can get a whole video on that. I'm not going to dive too deep into that here, but I do like framing my subjects on the lower thirds. Quick breakdown. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but I'm going to real quick. Your frame divided into 3 sections. So upper third, middle third, lower third, right? And then you have the right and left, right, and center. So when I say I like my subjects framed to the lower thirds, it would be like in the lower right of my frame, the lower third of my frame. So that's what I mean by that. So when I'm composing my image, it depends on what I'm trying to convey. I find myself a lot of times, it's normally like in the lower thirds if I have something leading me up, like these palm trees reaching up into the sky, right? Because if I were to cut these palm trees here and you didn't see the top of that, instead I framed it lower so you see more grass, less palm tree, it wouldn't look as good. My purpose for framing it this way is to let you see the tropical palm trees in the background. If I were to point it down and I gave you more grass, what's the purpose behind that? What's the meaning? Why am I showing you more grass? Is there a meaning? Not really. I think the more powerful image would come cutting that grass off and showing you more of the upper side, the palm tree side. So shooting with purpose and having a reason why you're framing your images a certain way. What are you trying to show to your viewer? That is shooting with purpose and just really elevating your image when you have a reason as to why you're framing it that way. In this case, is to show some of the palm trees and really highlight my bride here in the darker patch of the frame. To give you a little rundown of how it began, this is where we start, right? So this a little bit of an example of showing too much grass here on the lower area, right? You could frame this up a little higher and cut it down lower, closer to the dress, the bottom of your frame, as I did here, right? So let's start here, right? This photo is not a bad photo. You have a beautiful island in the background, you have the greenery. The bride is kind of framed within those lead lines. There's not really any disruptions. One of the rules is you don't want main lead lines cutting through major parts of your subject's body. So you wouldn't want a horizon line or this green bush line cutting through their head or through the middle of their chest or through their neck, right? You don't want cutting off at joints. So neck, shoulders, elbows, that even goes with your framing. You don't want this picture to be framed in a way where it would cut them off right at the knees, or obviously this looks terrible. There you go. Like that, right? Because you're like, where's the rest of her body? You don't want to cut through joints like that, okay? You always want to try and cut in between them or just include your full subject. You don't want lead lines cutting. That's why I kind of placed her in this pocket, and this is the direction they wanted. And I said, I'm not really a fan of this direction because there's a couple of things that stand out to me. First, this lead line of the tree kind of poking into nothingness. I don't see the palms. It kind of feels distracting that there's a black pole in the background there. I don't like these little lanterns in the back that are kind of poking out of the greenery. I think they distract from my subject. They take away from what I'm trying to do, which is bring glamour attention to my bride, right? There's these little things that are just kind of distracting. You're trying to figure out what's going on back there. So I told him, let's rotate a little more. So we started rotating here. We rotate a little more, and now you see the framing changed, right? We cut off a little more grass. We angled it up a little bit. So now we're getting a little more palm tree. Not quite as much, but you see it's a little better here. You see that now there's a purpose to that random stick in the background. You notice, okay, that's a palm tree. Before, you're like, what is that? Is that an error in the image processing, right? You still have some of these distractions here in the background, and one main thing that stands out right away is that you have this greenery that's cutting through the head and taken away from the shape of my subject, which is the bride here, and it can be a little distracting. So this is not a bad photo. This is a photo that can be turned in and the client will like it, especially if you watch my spot removal, my distraction removal video that I posted previously. You can clean up this stairs area, that little sign. You could clean this up and it will look nice. But still, I think this photo can go from nice to even better using both lead line placement and framing. What I mean by that is the next shot, we keep that same framing, right, with the cutting off at the bottom there, close to the bottom of the frame, giving it a little more space for easiness. It's kind of pushing the boundary of that frame down below. Here gives it a little more space. And what I did was I took a couple of steps back so that I could angle my camera up enough to get the top of the tree. So now you have not just a couple of little pieces of the palm, you see the full palm tree on the top, which kind of completes the image and gives the vibe of the place and the scene. And you also see that I have now moved over a little bit. Not only did I step back and tilt up, but I also rotated a little bit. So no longer she's in front of this bush or in between these two. Now she's right in front of this little green pocket, which her being a lot brighter than that background just makes her stand out and pop a lot more than here, right? So you notice the difference, how she pops. There's no disruption to the shape of her head, of the body, nothing that's taken away from that moment. And the reason why I placed her, let's say, on the right lower third as opposed to the center or the left third is because of this other lead line of the dress, the way that the dress is falling down into the left. If I were to place her in the center, well, I would have a lot more empty space on the front of her, or I would end up cutting off a little bit of the dress there, which I don't want to cut. I don't want to cut off the veil of the dress. And I don't want unnecessary leading space on the front because she's not looking forward, she's looking backwards. So the vision, the way she's looking, is leading you down towards the dress. She's looking at her dress. So I'm letting that dress, that vision kind of lead towards the side of the frame. It guides you through and then back up to look at our palm trees. So that's simple little tweaks that I just did by slowing down and communicating to my client, hey, I know you like this pocket. Can we just rotate? It'll be a lot better. Trust me. And we just did little incremental adjustments to get to where we wanted. This next image is another great example of lead lines. So in this frame right here, right away, notice my main lead line, which could be a horizon, or in this case, the edge of the trees and greenery, is cutting right through the head of both of my subjects. So yes, they're framed nicely in between all the palm trees, so they don't have tree trunks coming out of the heads. That's one thing that I see a lot, is people forgetting to look what's behind their subjects, and maybe they'll have a tree in the distance that's coming out of the head, or branches coming out of the side of the head. Very distracting, okay? Even if you don't notice it right away, subconsciously, there's something that kind of gives you uneasiness to that photo. So they're framed in between these palm trees, but the lead line, that main greenery line, is really cutting through the heads. Now here we have a few other lead lines. So lead line here, the top and bottom of that shrub, right? And the difference between the dark green and the sand. Here's another lead line here, leading us from the bottom to the center of the frame. A little bit of here, right? So those are all lead lines. What I like about these is that they're kind of drawing attention to the center of the frame. They're kind of funneling you up into that interaction of the two of them. Same with their dress. The dress, the way that it's bending up, it's kind of funneling you right into there, and they're falling into this little slot of all the greenery. But as I said, very distracting here, cutting right through the heads. It's a big no-no for me. I always try to avoid. So a solution for this is you just simply, if you can't reach up any higher, and you can flip down the screen and lift up the camera. I do this a lot where I can't get any higher. Here we're on a downslope, so I'm below them, making it harder for me to get up higher. So all I did was flip up my screen and look at it, lift up the camera, and just kind of boom, boom, take it right there. And you notice the difference. It's a minimal adjustment, just slightly 1 foot higher, same angle, same placement, same everything, just no longer getting cut off. If I could have gone higher, which first we had like 2 minutes to get this shot because we had to get him to Grand Entrance. I had no more height on me. I was maxed out as far as I could, stretched. If I could have get a chair, I would have gotten it. I would have loved to kind of get them a little bit lower, so their heads maybe right in here, lower. So all these lead lines are pointing straight at their faces, and getting a little more greenery on the top, which you can get more greenery on the top if you do a little bit of, magic with your spot removal and healing tool. But in the purpose of this photo is to show you what you can do straight from camera, right? So having that slight little angle adjustment, that slight little framing adjustment made a big difference for me, because now no longer are you getting that cut off. Now they're nicely slotted in that greenery. They're slotted and there's nothing coming out of their heads. It just kind of makes them pop right there. And all these lines are leading right into the center where my interaction is happening and bringing a lot more attention to my subject. One more little slight example. Here is the difference between these two. So it's very minuscule, but to me makes a big difference. Okay, here you see the mirror frame in the back cutting through the top of the head, right? This pocket was inevitable. This is where we were shooting. We didn't have an option to do this shot anywhere else. Very tight on time, very tight on space. simply all I did was once again bring the camera up a little bit and angle down so that now she was framed here. It was still cutting off the head a little bit, so I had the bride kind of tilt their head, and what I did was not only just tilt your head, my initial cue was look to your hands. So from looking down towards the shoe, I just said, look to your hand. So that already just naturally made that head tilt. And then from looking at the hand, come back to the camera, looking at the camera, boom, looking at the camera right there. So it started from here, head turn, back to the camera. The head naturally had that tilt from looking towards her hand, which was lower than her shoulder. So automatically you got to kind of tilt your head down. You can't just look down like that. You're going to look down like this and then look back at the camera, and that head tilt is already, instead of tilt your head to your right and look at the camera, it doesn't feel natural. So naturally getting that look and that positioning by simply couple step cues, boom, and then you get it. So that framed her right in that pocket. It let this little thing in the background, that little round shape, not cut into the shoulder. It just kind of framed her right in that little pocket there. And the other thing that I noticed I really like was I wanted my lead lines to not be interrupted. So here I'm getting too much ceiling, which you can crop out, yes, but I wanted the shoe to not get cut off like it did here. So I went up a little higher, tilted down, the shoe's no longer cut off, and now my lead lines from the corners start right from the corners of my frame, right? All these are kind of funneling you straight into your subject. These lead lines can be anywhere. They don't necessarily need to be mountains. They don't need to be horizons. It's just really any prominent line that can take away or draw attention to a certain point of your photo or to your subject. So be aware of these things, being aware of, I have heard from many photographers that I have taught how to shoot that this was a turning point in their photography when they became aware of distractions in the background, of things poking out of your subject's heads, of using lead lines to not cut off, but to frame them in that space. And it really elevates your photo and brings so much more attention to your subject. So go ahead, don't be a fool, give that a try. Next time that you're taking photos, just take a moment to look behind your subject. Is there anything coming out of their head? Is there anything kind of disrupting the shape of their bodies? Is there anything that I see in the background that's taken away? Should I move? Should I go up, down, change my angle, tilt, rotate? What should I do? Just be very aware of your surroundings and how can you maximize bringing attention to your subject as opposed to distracting from your subject. And lead lines and distractions in the background and the framing composition are things that are going to take your photography to the next level. And that's something that you can do easily. You can apply just instantly. You don't need to spend any money on any gear or nothing. It's just awareness and seeing it and applying it. So do it, get out there, have fun. Hope this helped.